Olá, sejam todos bem-vindos a mais um seminário de pesquisa do Centro de Informática. Eu sou George Darmiton, professor do Centro de Informática e atualmente estou como coordenador de pesquisa. E hoje a gente tem o prazer de apresentar o professor Stefan, que vai, o nosso palestrante de hoje, que vai apresentar a palestra com o título Benchmarking of Emergent Technologies for Near and In-Sensors Computing. O professor Stefan, ele possui graduação, mestrado e doutorado na Alemanha, é bolsista de produtividade do CNPq e é professor do Centro de Informática desde 2019. A palestra está sendo transmitida também pelo canal de YouTube do CIn e ela será dividida em duas etapas. Na primeira, o professor Stefan vai apresentar o seminário e, em seguida, a gente partiremos para a parte de discussão. Então, quem está no canal do YouTube pode fazer perguntas que eu lerei aqui para todos. A apresentação será em inglês. Professor Stefan, once more, thank you. The stage is yours.
Thank you. Primeiro, eu gostaria bem rapidamente agradecer a oportunidade de falar aqui no seminário. Eu cheguei no segundo semestre de 2019 e logo depois chegou também o Covid-19. Não sou responsável para isso, mas tem esse impacto para construir novo grupo com novo perfil nesse período onde a maioria dos trabalhos foi remoto. E por isso eu agradeço muito essa oportunidade para conectar pouco melhor para a comunidade aqui no CIn-UFPE e talvez além disso. Dito isso, eu vou agora mudar para inglês e começo com minha palestra. So the title of my talk is Benchmarking of Emergent Technologies for Near and In-Sensor Computing. And to start, I will give a little disclaimer. Yeah. So I will talk about a productivity grant project, which I gained in the last year. And this is a grant in microelectronics. So also then we are here at the Center of Computer Science. My main area is microelectronics. And maybe I have, for one or the other term or definition, a little bit a different view like we have normally here. And so I want already start with a conclusion, which is basically the three terms of my talk. So when I say in-sensor or near-sensor computing, I not only mean that we move intelligence or machine learning models on a microcontroller close to the sensor. I really mean that we do computing in-sensor. Second, when I'm talking about emergent technologies, these are semiconductor fabrication platforms. This will be the new technologies available to make these new ideas possible in hardware. And finally, benchmarking. Benchmarking here means that we will have a peek into the future, that we try to look what is going in front, what lies ahead of us. And this means that obviously we cannot really benchmark hardware. We have to do this via computer simulations. So if you expected something else, I'm sorry, but this is what I will talk about. So we will use computer simulation to look at new kind of architectures for intelligent sensors. But I have also a part of work, what we're doing in hardware with what's available at the moment. So maybe this is of interest for other people. Finally, if you're looking even more into the future, we will encounter the quantum world, and all electronic devices. Our new technologies are in dimensions of a few nanometers and are already quantum devices. So it's worth to have a small look what we can do maybe there. These are the topic of my talks. So I will start what I consider novel architectures for smart, or maybe we should say intelligent sensors. Then I give an overview of some activities we have on smart sensors for a smart Earth and why I think this is a very important and appropriate topic for an academic center of research. Then I will talk about these emergent technologies, how we benchmark it, just on an introductory level. And finally, we conclude with the quantum challenges. Oops, so I have to learn that. So let's start with some a little bit provoking. Are smart sensors, or the smartest sensors, which may be all sitting here in front of me, conscious? I will start with two observations from neuroscience. Obviously, I'm not a neuroscientist, so I beg your pardon if I don't explain something not so correctly, but two defining experiments, what we know about consciousness. Here we have two experiments to the left. We have an old experiment where we have a person who watches on a screen a kind of timer and says at which time he feels the urge to move, when he becomes conscious to do something. At the same time, we monitor with an EEG the activity in the brain, the electricity patterns in the brain, and with an EMG, we really measure the movement of the wrist. So we attach to the wrist a sensor and really measure when the person really moves. And in the lower part, here, we have the result. And as a result, we see, if we define the moment when the action takes place at time 0, that a little bit before the person becomes conscious. Yes, I want to move. And this is something we would consider as normal. Yeah? So we make a decision, and after a certain delay, the action follows. But what we also see is in a long period before here, there is a significant increased electrical activity in the brain, which the person is not conscious. It doesn't know. So in this sense, if we simplify this a little bit, we could say consciousness arises when unconscious or low level functions exceed a certain threshold. And if we exceed the threshold, we become aware what our brain is doing. This is one of the key results in neuroscience about consciousness. The other key result is on the right side. Today we can also map the activity patterns in a brain. And we see that not only it's a threshold, what also happens is that the regions which are active in a brain are completely different. As long as we are not conscious, and the upper is, if you see, or images, and we are not aware that we are looking at something, or then we become aware that we are looking at something. And the lower is the same with sound. Yeah, we have sound like noise in the background we are not aware of, but some sounds like music suddenly catches our attention, and we are aware that we hear the sound. If we define, or if you measure which regions is active when, you see that as long as we are not conscious, the processing of the data remains local. And at the moment when we are conscious, it spreads over the whole brain, basically, or huge areas of the brain. So that's the second message. We have low-level processing of data in our brain, which are local. And the high-level processing, which is identifying and giving meaning to what we see in the data, it's spread over a huge region of our brain. If we use this, we can see modern development of some technologies in a different light. Here we have an example of one of the technologies where all of us at one or the other point will work. It's the Internet of Things. Yeah? Internet of Things, we have a bunch of intelligent things or sensors which are connected via edge servers to the internet. And at the internet, we have cloud servers which can analyze the data. So we have three, in a very simplified manner, we have three locations where we have computational intelligence. We have it in the server, we have it at the edge, and we have it in the device which makes the measurements. Now, the modern development is that we try to move the intelligence away from the servers towards the edge. The reason for this is very simple, because if we gather all these data, terabytes of data, for example, an airplane gathers terabytes of data in a minute just to make sure that we all arrive safely. If you send all this data over the internet to a cloud server, we limit the bandwidth and we spend a lot of energy. So basically what we want to do, we only want to send relevant data after a low-level function processing. And to do so, we try to move the intelligence more to the edge. At this pyramid, we are using as a model of an intelligent system, artificial neural networks. Artificial neural networks are, in the sense, not really programmed, but trained. So we have training and inference, and we can move the inference closer to the edge. We can first do it in the server itself, then we can do it on the edge server, and then we can do it on the device. But more than that, we can distribute that. For example, in the picture D here below, we split the artificial neural network in one part which runs on the server and the other part which runs on the edge server. So we use a layered structure to execute one part and one resource which is closer to the edge, and the other part which is more closer to, or which is in the cloud. And we can continue. We can also divide the intelligence between the device and the edge server, which we see here in picture C, where we have part of the intelligence running on the device, here depicted simply as a cell phone, and the edge server. Or if we go all the way along, we really do the whole intelligent analysis of the data on the local device. And in this sense, we have here a little bit a similar situation. We have a sensory system which gathers a lot of data. Most of the data are probably not relevant for whatever we want to do, so we can access the meaning of this data already on the device and just propagate to the edge what needs more attention, and then propagate to the cloud server what we need to be conscious about. So this is the technologies or the architectures I would like to talk about, how we can achieve that, and how modern fabrication of semiconductors can help with that. If we just move some of these layers of the intelligence of the artificial network close to the sensor, we have several microcontrollers available nowadays. All are 32-bit microcontrollers like the Arduino Nano. And these are the limits we have. We have to work with these kind of microcontrollers to have already some intelligence, which is a little bit more than just being smart, being already a little bit intelligent. But now the next step would be to integrate this into a sensor itself. Why is this important? Because if we just move the microcontroller close to the sensor, we still have steps which costs a lot of energy and which are not so natural. One is the analog digital conversion. The sensors pick up analog signal. Our world is analog. Sensors are based on analog principles. And if we want to use a digital processor, we first need to translate this into a digital signal. Then we put the data in a local memory and call a microprocessor to process the data. Here we have several steps which are not very efficient. And we're talking about intelligent edge devices at the edge. I will show a little bit later application in the context of environmental monitoring or agricultural monitoring, where you really have a field with some sensors and the only energy source you have are batteries. So you have to do everything you can do to increase the lifetime of the battery. Otherwise, your sensor just runs 1 month or less and it's not useful anymore. Because of that, the intelligence or the lowest level or the first layers of our artificial neural networks should be analog in nature. And this is what I'm trying to indicate here. So I don't separate anymore the digital world from the sensors. I push the interface to the digital world further away from the sensor. And I can do this first for each sensor itself. What means a sensor here? So these can be different sensors, like a pressure sensor, temperature sensor, humidity sensor. But in most applications, maybe I should call it more a receptor. If we have an artificial eye or an artificial nose, we have not just one receptor. We have several ones to create an image. Yeah? Each receptor is a pixel, or each receptor is weakly sensitive to an organic molecule in the air. And I have a whole matrix of these sensors, which gives the whole data, the picture or the sensation of an odor. So I can try to put the intelligence at each of these receptors in itself. And in this sense, this I would call near sensor computing. Or I can use the whole matrix of receptors and try to combine them in a way that they already do processing. And this is actually also what happens in biology. Our eyes already are the first stage of interpreting the visual data. It's not just an optical sensor. Now, what are the first tasks we can have in an intelligent or smart sensors? As I said, we can first maybe differentiate between low-level and high-level functions. And low-level function is basically getting rid of some noise. Yeah, so sensor data are noisy, and I can try to use analog computing already to sharpen an image, and afterward already to do some kind of feature extraction, like emphasizing the contour of an image. I can do the same for sound, yeah, where I try to suppress the background sound and just focus on the sound which I want to interpret, which is important signal which calls for my attention or my consciousness. In chemical sensors, which is the last here, so this is optical, this is auditory, and these are gaze sensors. Gaze sensors have typically the property that they drift with time. So there's a baseline which shifts, and this doesn't have any information. It's just because the material, which is sensitive to the molecules absorbed on the oxide, for example, they change in time, and I have to get rid of that because I do not want to characterize that. They do not give me additional informations. So I have to make this baseline subtraction, and all of these tasks which I could already perform within a sensor. Finally, we have also high-level functions, which basically means they give context or meaning to the data. These are the layers of the artificial neural networks, which I spoke about. Yeah, so here we have a symbol of an artificial neural network, and here we try to classify what the data mean after I did already this pre-processing of the data in the sensor. And this can be also done, at least partially, in a sensor array. You do not need a microcontroller to do that. We don't have time here in this seminar to go into all details, but I just want to give a small idea how this might work. One of the layers in an artificial neural network is a classification layer, which takes the pattern and say, okay, this belongs to class 1, class 2, or class 3. What we do there in principle are matrix multiplication or multiplication accumulate operations. They can be done completely in an analog domain. Here I have an array of sensors, yeah, and or receptors. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to tune the sensitivity of each sensor, which is the weight of my artificial neural network. At that moment, the same stimulus on a receptor will create a different response. Typically in sensors, I have as a response current. If I do this, I have here the matrix where each of these lines of sensors are stimulated by a different part of my signal. Yeah, and I can organize, this is actually like a matrix where each of the lines is stimulated by one stimulus. And the current, which I just integrate via Kirchhoff's law, is, as a network, an electrical network, each current is already the matrix multiplication of one sensor line in response of one stimulus. So here, the output, the currents which leave the sensors already are matrix multiplications. And I never used Python code or digital analysis. I already received this in the analog domain. So this is one example, just to give you an idea about what kind of systems we might want to think about and design. There's another idea, yeah, and again, I'm just sketching ideas here because the field is so big and interesting that I don't know where to stop and where to begin. So I will give you just an overview of many different ideas. The other thing, another example of analog computing are spiking neural networks. Spiking neural networks actually use a time spatial pattern to codify the data. And this is something we find in biology in our nose. Yeah? Chemical sensors are not very selective. So if I present you a molecule like butanol, heptanol, pentanol, we have an array of receptors, and each receptor is a little bit differently sensible to this molecule. But it's not like that one receptor takes it all and the others are silent. No, everyone reacts a little bit. So now we have to make sense of this pattern of excitation of all these receptors to identify, okay, this is a signal which represents one specific chemical, like heptanol. And how nature solved this is by not using simply the excitation pattern spatial, use also a time delay. The reason for this is odor is not very specific. Yeah? So if I have a perfume close to me, which I like, I still have a lot of other excitations. Yeah? And I have to filter the signal which I like from the other ones. And how this is done is that actually the system samples in a certain frequency the odor once in a while. Yeah? And then looks if the delay of each of the sensors is similar. So what we here learn at the first stage is actually how you transform the excitation of each of the receptors in relation to a clock, how the delays are learned. So that at each sampling time, I create basically the same pattern which already eliminates noise, because the noise is at one sampling time a different molecule than another sampling time. So this will change, but the odor which I want to catch doesn't. So I can, with this, already suppress the noise completely in the analog domain without any microcontroller or digital processor involved. And after I have this pattern, which is here basically on the y-axis, the number of chemoreceptors, and on the x-axis, a little time window, to see how each receptor are delayed or not delayed, which are trained, which are weights in an artificial neural network. The spike pattern, then I can classify with a here fully connected layer at the end to say, okay, here this system can identify 200 different chemical compounds, and I have 200 outputs which say what is the probability that what I'm smelling at that moment or the sensors capturing at that moment represents which molecule. These are two examples how analog computing works and how you can integrate the analysis on low level, but also on high level already in the sensor without having to translate the signal from the analog domain to the digital domain. So this is what near sensor and in-sensor computing in the future will be. With that, I changed the topic and now talk about the application pools. There are many, many application pools for this kind of technology or demands of near or in-sensor computing. And our group specialized on smart Earth applications. I will explain a little bit why. First, what means smart Earth? Smart Earth means that we try simply to monitor the environment. Yeah. And basically what we want to do is we want to use low-cost electronic sensor, which mimics in some sense our human senses, like seeing, smelling, tasting, and hearing, and trying to learn what the environment tells us. This is obviously an important topic because, well, we are confronting climate change and we need to learn how far this goes, what are the changes in the environment. But also here in Brazil, we have the application pool of agriculture, which is an important industry, sometimes not considered as one, but it is an industry where we can use this also. Yeah. So there are also some fundings involved, which I'll show in a minute. But just, I don't have time to go in all of this project in details. I just give you a potpourri of the possibilities. I just want to start with something we didn't do, just to show you how innovative or crazy maybe this area can be. We are monitoring plants. Maybe one of the most striking features of a plant is that a plant is pretty silent. You can have it in your room, it sits there, never perturbs you. This is what you think. Here we have, and let's see if this now works. Oh, no. I can open this link. Doesn't want to open. Do I have? Now I'm a little bit lost here. A primeira Aba? Ah, obrigado. So here's a link, and it's a Nature paper from 2020, very recent, which says stress plants cry. Yeah, and here's the sound. So it doesn't sound like much. So what it is, it's actually not quite clear what it is, but it's not, we cannot hear it. It's at frequencies too low for the human ear to hear. But what happens most likely is that you have a plant which is stressed by not enough water. And if the plant doesn't have not enough water, there are little air bubbles in the capillaries, and they pop. Yeah, and this popping sound at a frequency of 100 hertz or something like that, you can make hearable if you pick up a microphone and shift the frequency a little. So this tells us basically, well, animals or other organisms, they perceive our environment very different than us, and there's information in it, yeah, because if you have a field of crop, yeah, which makes this noise, it means it suffers, it doesn't have enough water. And these are the signals we would like to look at. Obviously, we also would like to look at these interesting signals because they call attention, maybe bring more people to the. So now here's my presentation here. Okay. So, and we're trying to do something similar, yeah, with other senses. And I just pass very shortly on some of the project. All of this work is not done by me. Some of the people are sitting here. This is our little virtual space. So at the moment, I have 1 PhD students and 6 master students, but we have also IC and TCC students which contributing to here. And I just very rapidly pass about some of the projects. Just one disclaimer, yeah. In this area, because it's in some sense relevant to an important area here in Brazil, agriculture, you get fundings. Yeah? So this research we got funded first by Microsoft AI for Earth grant from 2020 to 2022. Now very recent, it even didn't start from Amazon. Yeah, we got cloud credits at least, something. And well, I could convince the directors of CIn to give me a little bit money to implement a demonstrator, which I show in a moment. So why is there money? Because there is a demand. Yeah? Embrapa, in the period of the pandemic, also could not do so much lab work, so they made an online questionnaire of producers, and there were 2 very important facts. The first is that a lot of farmers want to use sensors to improve their harvest. And the second thing is they were afraid about the costs, which are very real concerns which we have to address. The demand is there, but it will be not easy. And obviously, when we are working in the agricultural context, we don't have internet connections available. So we have to find solutions how to delay the emission of the data. And this again is an application pull towards intelligent sensors because they do some of the analysis already locally. We do a lot of things. I just will pass here because of the time very short. So we are using images captures by cell phones and try to identify on the images if we can see the symptoms of a disease. Yeah? We improved on that because there's obviously an application which runs completely on the cloud. Now we improved on this a little bit by increasing a little bit the layered structures of this interpretation and having multitask intelligence, which have more than one output. One is saying the plant is sick or not. The other say which kind of symptoms. The other what kind of agents you have. It's a fungi, it's bacteria, it's a virus. Or finally, what kind of disease you really have. But this is already a layered approach where you maybe one of these tasks you can put already on a cell phone and the rest in the cloud. We have to think about how to deliver these models to our clients, which are biologists or agronomes, which are not computer scientists. So these models have to be taken care of. We simplify the data and just look at color. This is a little bit as crazy as the sound of the plants. If a plant uptakes water, it changes its color. It becomes a little bit more light green. So if you're monitoring the color, we might also be able to identify the water stress of the plant. We're going to different frequencies, so not only optical sensors, but here radar sensors, which are sensitive to the water content of the plant. And here also the question is how to interpret radar data, which is very complex, which needs complex mathematical model. Is it possible to reduce it to give a first decision already in the radar sensor itself? If you're looking at different kind of signals, here we have these gaze sensors. Plants do not communicate mostly by color. They communicate mostly by evaporating or submission of chemicals, volatile organic compounds. And the plant is very clever. So one thing everyone knows, if you have a flower, it smells pleasant, not because to please you, but to call for pollinators, which can spread the plant. But the plant does more than that. It tries to be unpleasant for disease vectors, insects which spread diseases. If it cannot do this, it is attractive to predators of the disease vectors. In the sense, your enemy, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So they are calling the predators which eating the disease vectors. They're also using chemical sensors, chemical signals to induce immune responses, which means one part of the plant is already attacked. So this part evaporates the molecule so that other parts of the plant already can prepare when the disease spreads to them. And on this communication, neighboring plants can listen. They can tap into it and already prepare. This tree in a forest has a problem. It's attacked by some insects. Better to prepare. It will come to us too. All this communication is there, and we should tap into it and try to understand better how our environment works, all with intelligent sensors at low cost, if possible. And we have first work on that, where we use a simple air quality sensor, which is made to control if you do not have a gas leak in your room, or if your oxygen and carbon dioxide levels are okay. But we use this to monitor a plant during the pandemic. So this is basically done at the veranda of the student who had this work. And we could at least see that we can distinguish a day-night cycle. So we can, with these simple air quality sensors, at least see that the activity of the plant is different at night and at day, which is already some information for a sensor which costs just a few AIs. And finally, tasting. Tasting for me is something like we extract samples from the plant. So samples we extract from the plant are samples which contain genetic information. And typically this is done like you extract the genetic information, RNA molecules, send them to a lab, the whole thing. It's like the genetic information of a little a mini ecosystem, which a lot of life forms present, viruses, bacteria, fungi, the plant itself, sometimes insects. So take all the bunch, send it, extract the RNA, send it to a sequencing center, and they send you back the genetic information. But it comes as a huge puzzle. It comes cut it into a lot of pieces and all intertwined. And then the task is to resolve this puzzle and see which kind of species are present in the sample. This is big data. This is done on cloud servers, and actually that's one of the reasons why we got this grant for Amazon. But we also try or want to bring this a little bit closer to the edge. There are technologies today who can do this, which are called nanopore sequencing, where you pull in the genetic information through a little hole, and in this little hole, we have ions which have a current. But as soon as this hole is a little bit blocked, the ion current is damped. And this gives you a little bit difficult to see this oscillation. And this is specific to the base of your RNA molecule. And you can do sequencing directly in the field, but you still have to interpret what is this genetic information? What does it represent? Is a virus present which causes a disease which we have to treat? Yes or no? So we're working on this too. And finally, this is our project where we want to integrate all of that. So in principle, when we combine all of these sensor informations, we want to make a kind of digital twin of a plant, which we see on the left. Then we want to test this digital twin, or if the prediction of this digital twins beat with the reality. And there we have a little growth tent, which is still empty, but where we want to put all these sensors in, to see if in artificial neural networks, say we have to change one environmental conditions. If you change it, that the reaction of the plant is as expected. And then we want to scale up the system on a level of a greenhouse. Yeah, so this is what we want to do in Smart Earth. And it's a very rewarding activity because it's immediately impact, and you can see the results on a very actual topic. Now, I will explain the other two parts of my title, Emergent Technologies and then benchmarking. I showed you the architectures, how future intelligent sensors might look like. I showed you what are the application ports, so how it's get done. Again, we cannot go into detail, but semiconductor industry has evolved to a degree of precision that we can now fabricate structures with dimensions less than 10 nanometers. And you can do all kinds of structures. You can do holes, gaps, pores, lines, channels, all with dimensions in the order of 10 nanometer, which is already the opening of the quantum world. And with that, you can do sensors which already integrate some of the functionalities. Yeah, so I mentioned this DNA transistor, this pore where you sequence. You can do this artificially now. Before it was just a protein. It was a biological system, a pore which pulled like a little motor the RNA and read the letters. Now we can do it based on silicon. We can do or fabricate so small gaps that we can include in these gaps completely new materials, not anymore silicon like all computers are based on. Now we can use carbon materials like carbon. These are materials which are 2 or 1 dimensional, which have a huge surface in comparison to the dimension. And huge surface means a lot of possibility to attach sensor informations. That's a good aspect ratio. And we can go, which is shown here at the end, to so small dimension that we have just a single electron in a little trap which contains this information. And if I try to add a second electron, they repel each other. So I need more energy. The first one is for free, the second costs energy. And this means at the end that we have an oscillatory current. Every time we charge the capacitor, which is a single electron capacitor, we have to pay 1 energy. And these oscillations are already very similar to neurons, to synapses. So we can, with single electron transistors, maybe mimic what biological cells do on a much larger scale. And all this we have available now to integrate and to combine this with the applications I showed. And this will give us the pull we need. Here we have the traditional scaling regime. Most of the people will know Moore's law, which says that we can double the number of transistors in a given area every 18 months or 2 years. At the beginning, it was easy. It was basically geometrical scaling. Then it became more harder, and we needed to invent new materials like copper for the contacts, high dielectrica for the capacitors. And now it becomes so hard because we are already at 10 nanometers that this traditional scaling stopped. And now we can only integrate more functionality in the same area, which we actually want. We don't not really need more transistors. We need more functionality in the same area by, first of all, adding other materials like carbon materials to the silicon platform, or we do completely different stuff. Like we have systems on chips where we integrate analog and digital parts all in one chip, which is not an easy task because the digital world and the analog part, they don't like each other so much. Yeah? An analog part's like an antenna which disturbs the digital part. Or we go to completely different kind of information processing, not using charges or electrons anymore, using light. And we have here at the Institute in Physics a group which show with photons quantum memory. So these technologies are also developed here. I already mentioned neuromorphic computing as an example of analog computing. Things about the spiky neural networks or quantum technologies. These new forms of processing data gives us an additional pull in addition to Moore's law. And Moore's law already was an exponential acceleration of the technologies we can use day by day. So if this comes reality, we have it's such a diverse platform of integrating new stuff that the possibilities are nearly unlimited. It's one of the messages I would like to transfer. The other one is flexible electronics. Yeah, so we can also today make electronics which is not rigid anymore, which is flexible, which is also interesting because you can incorporate it in your clothes. Or here in this example, you glue it on a leaf of a plant, and if the leaf grows, the sensor grows with it. It doesn't fall off because it's not rigid. Yeah? And then you can measure by this growing process the stress the growing leaf represents for the sensor, and you can basically monitor the growth. You can say basically how much millimeters the plant grows in a time scale of weeks or months. That's why I skip. So now we see that we have a platform available of very new technologies which have to be combined with these applications. And this is now the new paradigm, which was different before. Before, the technology determined the process of microelectronics. Today, it is more the application pull, which says what we need to integrate and which technology we have to select, which fabrication platform we need to use to realize our dreams. And this brings me to the last part, the benchmarking part. So we started with Moore's law. We had this time from 98 to actually 8 years ago, where we could push the scaling still by new invention of materials. But now we have reached the end of the road, and now we have to identify depending on the application, which fabrication technology we will use. And this fabrication technology we have to benchmark in the context of an application. So the new roadmap, which is an organization of researchers which trying to predict the future, sounds a little bit like magic, but science is about predicting future also. And the focus topics they have, I listed here, and we discussed most of them already. Yeah, systems and architectures. So it's basically not programming anymore. It's more training and inference. It's not only one technology platform. There are many with very different materials, which means very different physics, also very different scales. Yeah, a flexible sensor on a scale of micrometers behaves very different like a nanodot of a diameter of 2 nanometers. The physics is completely different. From general purpose, like a microprocessor, to build for purpose, which means I have the solution I need for the application I want, not one Swiss knife which solves it all. We have to speak about connectivity, obviously. We have to integrate new materials, and we have to go away from digital processing to analog processing, and at the end, probabilistic computation, which at the end leads us to quantum computation, which is a form of probabilistic computing, if you stretch it a little bit to the limit. And all this is part of technologies you want to benchmark. Benchmark then basically means the following. You try to pick up an application. For example, you want to have technology platforms ideal for artificial neural networks. So you have somehow to isolate what is the most basic component of an artificial neural network, because you cannot immediately, with a technology which still does not exist, say how the whole thing will behave. You have to focus on smaller parts. One way, for example, to do this is use cellular neural networks. This is a cellular neural network. The cellular neural networks consists of basically a bunch of controlled current sources, linear current sources, and the weight of this current source is the weight of your neural network, which you can train. And you can show that these cellular neural networks are Turing complete, which means you can implement any kind of computation on them. And you can, for example, implement on them a convolutional neural network, by training the weights correctly. And then you can say, okay, if I can implement all this kind of artificial neural networks on this platform, I will try to implement this basic cell, which means I still have to break down the current sources on the transistor level using tunnel transistor, using carbon nanotube transistors, using graphene transistors that makes the best current sources, and then predict how these cells will work. And predict how the cell works means how fast they are and how many energy they consume, because these are the two figures of merits which are most important. The response time and the energy to maintain this intelligence operational. And then you can simulate this on a computer and try to select the best technology. We do this, so we simulate these kind of technologies. We even invent on this scale new kind of technologies. Here we have an example of a multi-mode nanotransistor. So the nanotransistor has at this active part little carbon nanotubes, which are little tubes enrolled. They look like a tube. These nanotubes you can electrostatically dope, or you can basically say, if you want, that the transistor works on a high energy mode and a low energy mode. You can tune this, you can configure that. You have it here. These are digital technologies. This is a high performance technology, which means a small delay, but huge power consumption. And here you have a low voltage technology, which has a larger delay, but a smaller power consumption. And basically you have to compromise between what you want. You want speed or you want energy efficiency. But with this new technology, it becomes possible to switch dynamically. So at one point, I want low energy. This is when the sensor is sleeping. It doesn't do a lot. It just monitors being happy. So, but at that point, the activity rise, and it says, oh, now I have a signal which I have to send, and I have to send it urgently. So I have to switch to a high power mode to emit the signal to the edge server. So we can do this today dynamically. If this technology will ever see the light, it's a different question, but it is in principle possible. If it's scalable to billions of transistors, which we have in a modern digital system, is a different question. Here you see how these simulations look like, but I will come to that at the last part when I conclude with quantum technologies very shortly. The last axis which I want to present when we say about benchmarking new technologies beyond delay, beyond energy consumption, is accuracy. Because we do not have to do everything perfect. You know, there's a saying, if you do 70% correct, stay with that. The last 30% are much more difficult. Maybe that's the reason why our students pass with 7 already. I don't know. But many applications do not need exact computation. We have here 2 examples. One is both are post-processing. The one post-processing try to reduce the noise of a picture to make the picture more sharper. It's difficult to see, but this picture is less sharp than this picture. But all of them look very fine already. But none of them uses exact arithmetic circuits. All of them use adders and multipliers, which are only approximate, which makes errors. Because it's not needed to sum 2 numbers exactly. It's not needed to multiply 2 numbers exactly. It's enough if you do it in a certain tolerance level. And this is another axis we have to increase. We have to focus in benchmarking a little bit on accuracy. Another example is this change prediction, where we have just 2 pictures. And if you look very carefully, this part has changed and this screw here has moved. These are the 2 things which change from one picture to another. And now your sensor shall say, what has moved? What has changed? I only want to submit this information. The rest is not important. Only what changes is important, very typically in sensor applications. And there you see also with approximate dividers in this case, a lot of them work correctly. And then if you exaggerate, you see changes which are not real. But it works. So accuracy is a possibility. And we are working on this too. So we are trying to evolve, not design, evolve approximate circuit by genetic algorithm. This is another message. A lot of this complexity does not need a human designer. Evolution is a way to create complexity, and we can mimic this on a computer. So we are doing approximate circuits evolved on a computer to have components we can benchmark and say which technology platform is the most appropriate platform to implement these kind of circuits. To come to an end, let's look to the very, very future. What you learned, or maybe I hope you learned till now, is we have these trends. We try to push intelligence closer to the sensor. We try to push away the analog-digital interface further into the cloud. But we can also push further away from the sensor is the interface between the quantum and the classical world. Quantum phenomena are a resource. We're living now this paradigm change where the people more and more realize that quantum phenomena can be a resource, like temperature can be a resource, which we can use to, for example, classify data. And I think this is a big opportunity. And to my delight, there was a workshop at the beginning of the year which says technologias quanticas no acro, means acro technology, which comes to a huge surprise because when you think about quantum technologies, for sure you don't think about agriculture. So where is the quantum world in agriculture? Here are some answers. Well, first of all, you have a business, so it's an IoT business. So you have to send data. Data have to be secured. So you need cryptography to secure the data. Quantum cryptography is one of the hot topics. But other topics is you really use quantum technologies to improve your plans, like a hybrid individuum, which is enhanced by nanotechnology, or you use sensors. And this is what I try here just to say. Sensors at the very beginning are quantum objects. I already told you that we are fabricating today structures in 2, 3, 4 to 10 nanometers, which is much smaller than a virus. It's very, very small. And here you see all the time quantum effects. And I just give this little idea what you see here. This is actually a tunnel transistor, where you have energetic states, which are here, and the electrons from this energetic states, they have to make a hop across a zone which is forbidden. Yeah? The electron cannot be there. They are forbidden. The quantum world forbids them to live there, to reach the other side of the wall. If this gap is very, very large, you see here that the level of the electron, here we have energies, it's very, very sharp. It's nearly impossible to see. It's a well-defined energy. It's an isolated electron trapped in a potential well and lives there happily forever. It's a quantum object. But as soon as you open your quantum world and make an interaction with the environment, which you do here, because here the gap is not so big anymore. The electron can leak into the gap and make the happy jump to the other side. At that moment, these levels are not sharp anymore. They are broadening. And this is the loss of the fuzziness of the quantum world. So I have in the quantum world very discrete energy levels, but as soon as I bring them into contact with the exterior world, they broaden. I lose quantum resources, but I gain a current. So I can make this negotiation. Yeah, I start with quantum information, but then I have to read out this information. So I bring the sensor or the sensoring material in contact with the outside world. The quantum fuzziness will disappear. Classical physics will arise. Classical information I gain. But I can play with that. When I do this and how far from the sensor I do it and how rapid I do this. And this is maybe explored in nature. This was my final slide. Plants, just to stay in this picture again, they are master photosynthesists who say they can transform the energy of the sun with an efficiency which artificial solar cells do not have. And there's one miracle or one open question. How does plants do this? How plants do achieve such a high efficiency? They're not very intelligent after all. And it's not really known. It's close to the theoretical limit. It's not really known what's going on. But the challenge is the following. At the beginning of transforming the energy from the sun, electromagnetic energy, into finally chemical energy in the case of plant, or the current in the case of a solar cell, you have to separate charges. Charges attract each other. There's a positive charge, there's a negative charge. So typically they dance and recombine. And the only thing you did, you absorb sunlight and transformed it into temperature. Not very useful maybe to heat your shower, but more than that not. You want to have electricity. You have to separate the charges and keep them separated. A plant means that these separate charges have to arrive before they recombine in an activity center where this charge is transformed into chemical energy, yeah, in ATP. This has to happen faster than the recombination. But the charges do not know where the center is. They have to find it. And there's one hypothesis, I would call it, maybe it's less than a theory, that the electrons do a quantum search. Because they're quantum objects and they spread in parallel in a network of molecules so that they can be at several places at the same time. Yeah, these are the funny things about the quantum world. And then they can basically parallelize the search and encounter this energy center more rapid than the combination time. So they arrive there to create chemical energy before they recombine. So in principle, even if this might be not true, it shows that we could use quantum resources to do kind of intelligent sensors which first still live with the quantum signals the sensor itself has before we transforming that into classical energy. With this, I think I already spoke way too long. I will stop. Then we already spoke in Portuguese and in English, so I will finish with one German phrase, yeah, Wissenschaft brücken. This is actually the motto of the university where I worked before, the TU Dresden, and it means that science or knowledge actually creates bridges. So it's something which brings all us together from different cultures, different backgrounds, different nationalities. And in German, this works a little bit nicer because Wissenschaft means also science, but Wissenschaft means also create knowledge. So science is the human endeavor to create knowledge, and hopefully we use this knowledge to make our world more sustainable for the future generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Stefan, for the presentation.
Sorry that I spoke so long. It's cool.
Now we can go to discussion. So, questions? No? I have one. Let me check here, because in the first part of your presentation, you talk about the near and in sensor. So the idea is to, I get the idea because it's too expensive to have this kind of processing in the cloud, so I need to put it close to the application.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea, it's a kind of filter, because you need to filter the data and only to send the data that are more relevant
Mm-hmm.
to the cloud. And this filtering is done, please correct me, using some machine learning algorithms or some filters or some preprocessors.
Mm-hmm.
But focus on the machine learning part, because we have a myriad of different algorithms.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that some algorithms are better for some kind of applications.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, what kind of machine learning algorithm is more
Appropriate.
appropriate for this task?
This is an excellent question, and actually, I hope that I get the answer from my colleagues, from you and others. Let's first rapidly say, so one more time, the challenge is that we cannot send all the data we are gathering by the sensors to the cloud, because it's just too many data. There are terabytes, and more things we connect to the internet, more data we will create. So it's simply impossible to send all this data and process them in the cloud. So we have to do some of the processing earlier. Now, to which level we divide it, it depends a little bit on your application scenario. As I said, very obviously is this pre-processing of data, which is kind of simply filtering, taking out noise, improving the quality of the data. But we also want, and this is your question, already give context to the data as close to the sensor itself as possible. And this is what in-sensor and near-sensor computing means. I try that the sensor not only execute low-level functionality, but already some high-level functionality. So the question, which model, artificial intelligent model is more appropriate, unfortunately, I cannot answer. But for sure, one thing which is favorable, which I tried to explain a little bit, is if we can divide the model in different layers so that we have a first exit layer running on the sensor, which then only submits the results of this first layer, an early exit layer, if you want to say, which is then further processed at the edge server or in the cloud. So for sure, architectures which we can divide into various layers are favorable. Now we have a problem sometimes. For example, if you think about convolutional neural networks, it is the first layer which is the most expensive one. So this is not really the best layer to put on a sensor. So I don't have the answer, but this is actually also something where I would like to work on and call people like you who know much more about neural networks or machine learning models in general. So in some sense, the architecture of this model should be favorable for in or near sensor computing so that the first part is less computational costly, yeah, so that we can already do some kind of feature extraction. Doesn't have all features, so the first features like a contour or whatever, yeah, that this can be done and the rest will be done later, yeah, or features which allows an early response, which say, okay, the feature I extract from my signal means I can ignore it safely. I don't have to send anything, or no, this feature calls my attention. This feature may mean we are close to have a fire, or we have to analyze and have a closer look and just emit the information or send the information at that moment to the cloud. So this kind of adaptation of architectures is needed. And you send just 10 minutes or 20 minutes before the talk, this little paper about a depressed artificial intelligence scientist and how to do. So here's a way of small models. Yeah? So this strategy of innovative academic research, this would go in the direction of how we can create small, meaningful models and divide huge model and distribute the model over several computational instances. That answer the question?
Sure. Sure. And I was wondering, because the idea is to train for example, the machine learning model offline and to integrate in the system, not to train it online, yes. Because you talk about concept grid, so this could be a problem because you need to train it offline and upload it constantly, or
yeah. So most of the literature still just discuss inference, which means you have trained models. Maybe you have a continuous training strategy so that the model gets updated. But basically, you do kind of software update on your sensor OS and download a new model. So it's at the moment more inference, but obviously, I mean, if you have 10 nanometer technologies, we can integrate billions of transistors in a 1 square centimeter area, and it will become possible to do also training in sensor. But the question is if the energy we need for that is really possible in a remote setting. So I doubt this a little bit. So I think this maybe stay at the edge, which means the servers which creates the connectivity to the sensors. But who knows? I mean, let's be open for the future. É, claro.
You can ask in Portuguese, no problem. No? Vou monopolizar, okay? I have another one.
Cool.
I have a doubt because in your paper you show here that when you and your colleagues select the selection of dynamic selection of the sensors, I was in doubt if it's two kinds of sensors or you have one sensor that changes the behavior.
Now here, you talk here at the very beginning. This one here?
No, the one that you show that
the dynamic reconfiguration of the transistor.
Yeah.
No, this is dynamics.
Yeah, exactly this one.
So this is this can be done in real time. So basically, what you do, and maybe now you gave me the possibility. I don't know if I can. I have a little bit difficulty still with the technique here. Do I have this here? Oh, no, I shouldn't have done that. I somehow lost my Gibbs, but anyway, I can explain it like here. It is. You have two control signals. You have two terminals where you can apply a voltage. One control signal, which is called here the control gate, simply controls the current. If this control gate is off, the current is 0. If the control gate is high, you have a high current. But what means high current? High current is defined by the program gate. Here you have another electrical signal which you can apply, and imagine now this is a channel. Here you apply this potential, a voltage is a potential. If you go now here you see the acting from here to here of the control gate. So if you want to inject an electron from here, it bumps into this wall, it cannot go on, the current is 0. As soon as the control gate has a voltage, you lower that, and then the electron can freely travel. It doesn't have a mountain, a potential wall across its path, and it can freely move from one contact, which we call the source, to the other contact, which we call the drain, because one emits the electrons, the other pull it out. So in the other configuration, I use this region and apply a program signal to pull it up. And at that moment, the charges have to tunnel across this region to this island. And to turn it on, they have to tunnel again. So they have to make two tunnel jumps. And tunneling means that the electron have to cross a region where it's forbidden. So it disappears at one side of the wall and appears on the other side of a wall. This is possible in the quantum world. Obviously, classical, impossible. But this mechanism is extremely efficient to switch off the transistor, because tunneling means that the electron have to cross a forbidden region. So you can switch it off very well, but you cannot switch it off too well, switch on too well, because it still is a tunneling current. And here, this process going from here to here is less efficient than going simply without any wall in between. And these are these two kind of modes. One is an energy saving mode, which has a processing, but at low current levels. And low current levels mean that the delay times are much higher. But you can switch it off very, very nicely, which means if you don't do anything, you don't leak energy. The battery doesn't use any energy, and you increase the lifetime of the battery. And from here to here, it's just a different voltage you apply. And this can be done in real time and any time you want. So you really can. So one protocol of interconnected sensors is basically you let all the sensors sleep and do some background processing which does not need high not high performance. Yeah? This you can do in this mode. But then at one point you decide, now I want to see the data. I want to emit the data, for example, to the edge server. At that moment, I wake up the sensor. And waking up the sensor means I apply a program pulse, and then it goes from here to here. And then I have a normal transistor, a normal amplifier available with all the high performance we are used for digital systems. So this is a real-time configuration. It's not that you configure it all the time. Yeah? It's also a delay. Yeah? So this reconfiguration needs times. But it can be done fast enough to say, okay, if the protocol sending your data via Bluetooth or LoRa or Wi-Fi demands now access, you can reconfigure your system for a high performance mode, do what you need to do. And after that, you issue again the command, go to sleep, rest. It's not sleep like deep sleep. It's doing something, yeah, but it's not really in a high performance mode. It's like we are in the morning and okay, I do my first business a little bit with a little less power, but I'm still able to do something, and this can be switched. Yeah, and this reconfiguration, this is now discussed. Our group, we contributed to that. We are not the only ones who are working on that, but it was one of the first who had that idea, and it would be nice to come to follow up with that and try to construct intelligent sensors, which are intelligent also in the sense of I decide how much energy I want to use. It's also a decision. I do not need to use energy now, so I put myself autonomously in a kind of sleep mode. And now I have an event which calls my attention. Now I wake myself up autonomous, not that the protocol from outside say, oh, I want to see the data. No. The sensor itself decides I want now to be heard. Yeah, so this would be maybe a possibility to use this, but I can only call our students to join because after all, at the universities, you are the ones who will do the work, not us.
Pessoal, vamos agradecer nosso palestrante.
Muito obrigado.
Muito obrigado, Stefan, pela excelente apresentação. Bom saber o que é que você está pesquisando. E com isso a gente encerra mais um seminário de pesquisa do Centro de Informática.